Shalom, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a live episode of Life with Sharon, Midday Motivation. It is Friday, May the 6th, and I emphasize May the 6th because yesterday I said it was April, even though I said Cinco de Mayo. So if you watched yesterday's, forgive the faux pas, but today is Friday, May the 6th. 2022, and it's a great day to be alive and well with the blessing of this fresh 24 today. What are you going to do with it? You're going to be productive? Yes, you are. Speak that affirmation into the atmosphere that you are going to be productive today and you will have a productive day by putting actions behind those words. Again, thank you for watching Life with Sharon Midday Motivation. Today, we're talking about 5 reasons couples clash. Today and all this week is Relationships Week. We talked about everything concerning relationships this week, from 7 red flags to notice when dating, 7 healthy behaviors for a successful relationship, why people ignore red flags when dating. And yesterday we talked about 3 outside sources that interfere with relationships or that can interfere with relationships. And today we're talking about 5 reasons why couples clash. But before we get into the heart of the matter, click the notification bell so you'll know when we're on, like the page, subscribe to the channel, and put any comments or questions in the feed so I can read them and answer any questions that I might be able to answer. And again, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget, like the video and click the notification bell. All right, so 5 reasons why couples clash. Number 1, going into a relationship with a single mindset, meaning a single person versus a person in a relationship or in a marriage, versus the single mindset versus the relationship or marriage mindset. 2 different mindsets. And unfortunately, we get into these long-term relationships and marriages, and no one helps us to understand what we need to do differently, how we need to think differently to therefore then behave differently in these long-term relationships. Again, this is something that hopefully by having this dialogue and other dialogues that we will continue, you and others will begin to understand that let's not enter into these long-term relationships and marriage without some understanding of what it is that we're actually getting into. Because when you get into a marriage, a long-term relationship, there's some modifications that you need to make to you going from a single person to a married person. And that means your mindset needs to change. What you thought about how you use social media as a single person, you don't have to account for it as a single person. So how much time you spend, how many people you're DMing of the opposite sex, how much you're using it to put your business out online. You can do what you want to do. Not saying all of that is healthy, but it doesn't matter. You're not accountable to anyone. But in a long-term relationship or in a marriage, you are accountable to your mate. And if your mate has problems with that, then I, as the partner, need to make some adjustments, or we need to have a conversation so we both can set some parameters, some boundaries on how we use social media. And I'm just using social media as one example because that's one of the things we talked about yesterday, about one of the 3 things that can interfere with a relationship. And I say can because social media doesn't have that power. We have the power to control our behavior. And when we have the conversation and set boundaries on things, and now we know that we're operating on the same page, and the good faith effort that both of us are going to do what it is that we're saying we're going to do, now we can get somewhere. And now we're operating as a couple, as a team. And a couple is a team. We're on the same team. But oftentimes couples clash, and they act like they're on different teams, opposing teams. But the couple is supposed to be on the same team. When we single mindset going into a long-term or marital relationship, it doesn't work. And that's why couples clash. We're coming together doing what I want to do versus what we should do for the greater good of the marriage. It's about it's about we, not I. In a relationship, it's not about me, it's about we. It's not about me, it's about us. And so if we have the single mindset, it's not going to work. And there will be a lot of clashes. So that's number 1, having a single mindset versus a marital or relationship mindset. Number two, poor communication. Poor communication hinders any type of relationship. But now we're talking about a couple relationship. If we're communicating either passively, which is we don't give ourselves a voice, and we just go along to get along and just do whatever the other person wants us to do, then I'm not giving myself a voice. And eventually, and over time, with things happening, I become angry and resentful. And what do I do typically? I become aggressive. I go to the other extreme and I become aggressive when something happens. It's like, the tip of the iceberg and the punishment doesn't fit the crime. And I give you all of my wrath for that particular thing that has just happened. But the wrath is not about that thing that just happened. It's about all the stuff I've been holding in as a passive communicator. And now I'm going to give you all of that for this one minor, maybe major, but one minor or major incident. But it's getting everything I've been holding in. That's not how we should communicate. Versus the aggressive communicator who speaks their mind, speaks their truth, speaks their honesty, but their delivery, it's the problem. They're rude in their delivery, maybe using profanity, yelling, screaming, belittling, demeaning words. Because I'm not concerned about your feelings when I'm speaking to you that way, even though I'm being honest and direct. But it's how I'm sharing my honesty that's the problem. And so that's a poor communicator as well, because I'm not listening to you now. I hear you speaking. I'm standing right in front of you, but I've turned you off because I don't want to hear you talk to me that way because it's disrespectful. You're not honoring me with your words and your tone of voice, your pitch and your volume. All of that matters in communication. Effective, assertive communication. Assertive is where we should all strive to be. An assertive person is honest like the aggressive person, but they do care about your feelings and how they say what they're going to say. It's not the what, it's the how. So an assertive person is going to take your feelings into account. And they're going to start their sentences off with I and own what they say and not you to make you feel blamed and attacked about how I feel. So I'm going to say I feel instead of feeling word, mad, glad, happy, sad, frustrated, angry, doesn't matter. However I feel. Then about the specific behavior, because that's what we can change. This global, you do this, you do that, and these global terms we use. Well, I can't do anything about that, but I can do something about a specific behavior that you speak to. I feel unheard when you're texting when I'm talking. Well, now the texting is the issue because you can't be attentive to me if you're texting while we're talking. So now, yes, that's something that I can correct. I can stop texting when we're talking. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. So now I just assertively said that I feel unheard. I wasn't like, I feel unheard with the whole neck, going and the head bobbing and everything like that. I just said, I feel unheard when you're texting when I'm talking. And then I'll further that statement by saying, in the future, letting the person know what I expect of them. In the future, I would appreciate if you wouldn't text when we're talking. So I can feel so I can feel heard. That's it. Simple. I wasn't mad. I wasn't angry, but I was firm. You understand where I'm coming from. You know what specific behavior that has made me feel like I'm not being heard in this relationship. And now there's something that you can do about it. I gave myself a voice, so I didn't sweep it under the rug to go along and get along. I wasn't aggressive in my presentation to be rude. I was assertive. So now I dealt with the issue when it came up. So it's not piling up between us like oftentimes we do. We don't speak on things and the pile between us gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And now there's a mountain between us and we're just on opposite ends and we're mad and at the point of breaking up or divorce door because we let so much pile up because we didn't address it in an assertive manner. So number one, single mindset versus a relationship or marital mindset. Number two, reasons why couples clash, poor communication. And number three is unknown triggers. If we have unresolved issues, and we all do, in our life, and especially if we have trauma in our background, there's triggers going on that we might not even know about, as well as our mate might not know about. but we're being triggered nonetheless. And we're coming back with a response, a trauma response, an unresolved issue response. But by not knowing myself well enough to know what triggers me so I can let you know, so we can devise a plan or workaround until I'm healed from that, because maybe I'm in therapy or I'm working on myself. But because we don't know each other, we're triggering, know each other and know ourselves, we're triggering one another and our issues are clashing. Well, this is just me, or this is just me. No, those are your issues clashing. But there's something you can do about that. You can get into counseling, you can get into therapy, coaching, whatever it is that you need, professional advice, so you can understand yourself better and heal from those unresolved issues. So now we're not clashing as much. Relationships are going to have problems. That's not the issue. It's control what you can. So therefore, we come to the relationship as whole as possible. None of us will be 100% because we're not perfect. In our broken, flawed humanity, will never be perfect. But I want to be as close to 100 as I can when I get into a relationship. So I can bring the healthiest me to this relationship. And hopefully you bring the healthiest you as well. It doesn't work like math in a relationship. 1 and 1 is 2 in math. 50 and 50 equals 100. If I bring 50% of myself and you bring 50% of yourself, we have half a relationship. We bring half of ourselves. It doesn't work the same way in relationships. I need to bring as much as 100 and as close to 100 as you can bring and I can bring. And now we can have as much of a whole relationship as we can. So begin to understand yourself better by seeking help if that's what you need. So therefore, you know how you are responding to this person. I'm not responding out of an unresolved issue, a response or a trauma response, because I understand what my triggers are. I understand what my issues are. And now I'm giving what you're saying to me or how you're behaving to me, I'm giving it the proper response that it deserves in the moment, not giving it my baggage plus the moment, where then it's too big, it's too much. And we know that just dissolves into an argument. So that's number 3. Unknown triggers because of unresolved issues in our past and trauma from our past that's unresolved. Number 4 is not operating as a team. A relationship is a team and you're on the same side. Oftentimes couples operate as if they're on opposing teams. You're on the same side. But what are you not doing that's allowing you to operate like that? You're not communicating properly, right? You know how see sports teams, they have the huddle. How often are you huddling up to talk about the game plan? You need a game plan. We need to talk about how we're going to do this relationship successfully. And if you talk about things more up front, you'll have less back end issues because you had good communication up front about how we're going to deal with children. What's your discipline style? How do you deal with money? How do we want to deal with social media? How do we want to deal with outside influences? All these things need to be discussed in the beginnings of a long-term relationship. We don't wait till we get into marriage and down the line to then discuss these things because now they're coming up and now we're clashing. No, we need to know about this earlier on so we can see how compatible we are, because we could be on polar opposite ends with some things that could really be detrimental in a relationship. For instance, what if one person wants children and one person doesn't? That's a huge issue. But if we haven't talked about it prior to getting married, now we're having this conversation. It's like, whoa, put the brakes on. That's a problem, because those are children. Having children, that's a huge issue for couples. And when one doesn't want a child or children and the other does, how do you overcome that? Not saying it can't be overcome, but that should be something that's discussed beforehand so you can talk about it and work it out and see, hey, if this is even going to work. Because there have been marriages that have ended up in divorce because one of the people in the marriage didn't want children and the other person in the marriage did, and they couldn't come to terms with it. And so they got divorced. I know people who that's happened to. and it's real. So we need to have those conversations before. But that's what working as a team does. We get in that huddle. We talk about things. We work things out. How do we envision this? So we can make the best possible relationship happen because we're planning, we're talking, we're engaging. Relationships don't just happen in a good way just because. We got to put work and effort into it. So, teamwork, not operating as a team is one of the reasons, and that's number 4 for today, why couples clash. And so the last reason is, drum roll please, not understanding one another's role in the relationship. This is big, I think, because oftentimes the female is doing the male's role and maybe the male is doing the female's role, and like, how does that work? It doesn't. Each person has a role in the relationship. And when we're crossing roles, because one, we're not having the conversation, we're not communicating, we're not talking, and also two, our history, our baggage is coming into play in this relationship because it does for all of us. We can't get around it. And so we need to talk about, how do we do this? What are some of my responsibilities and what are some of your responsibilities as we decide as a couple, regardless of how you were raised? That might have worked for them or may not have worked for them. You come together as your own family unit. How do we want to operate? What's going to work for us? And maintaining those roles within the relationship that you two have, as the couple have discussed and that you believe work for you. Now, again, as you evolve, as the couple evolves, but you evolve as individuals. You're not staying the same, but then you evolve as a couple as well. You're having an ongoing conversation. The conversation, the communication never stops. Because as you're ever evolving, the conversation needs to evolve. How you start out, now you're 5 years, 10 years, 20 years in, we're not doing the same thing that we did when we were married for 1 year. We're 20 years older. We still have to have an ongoing conversation about, how are we doing things now? What do our roles look like now? And I need to not step over into your role, and you need to not step over into my role, because that's when we're going to clash. That's why we have different roles. When you see companies, you don't see 2 CEOs, you have one. Because one has to be the main leader. Not that the CEO doesn't take advice or suggestions, etc., for the vice president of the company or the CFO. Of course, he or she does. But the final say ends with the CEO or the board of directors. So same thing in a relationship. You have a head and then you have someone, the vice person under that in the relationship, right? Both of them have power and authority in their own right. But we don't have 2 heads. And that's when we clash, when one is trying to do the other's role. Vice versa, it doesn't matter which. We have to stay in our lane, but we have to communicate about it. And it's okay to have conversations about it. And that doesn't mean just because you're not the person that is the head that you are less than. We are all equal, but we all have roles. And when I do my role, play my role to the fullest, and my partner plays their role to the fullest, now we're operating on all cylinders and we're being productive, because I know my lane, you know your lane. We're both staying in our lanes and doing the best in our lanes. That's what makes us productive. That's what makes us work as a team. And again, with the sports teams, you don't see the guard going over to do another person's job. No, you're crashing into me. That's not your lane. Stay in your lane. When you stay in your lane and be the best in your lane that you can be, now we are getting somewhere. This feels good. We're gelling. We're meshing. We're being productive. We're getting things accomplished. This feels good. This is a big issue in relationships, a big issue in long-term relationships and marriage. People stepping outside of their roles and doing the other person's job because, well, I feel as though you're not doing well enough, so I'm going to step. That's not how it works. And then that's why you see relationships not being healthy. If we don't feel that our mate is doing their role properly, let's talk about it. Don't step in and try to take my role over. No, let's talk about it. Be able to receive and give constructive feedback, because sometimes I may feel the same way about you. Let's be able to hear from one another together. Maybe I have some suggestions that the partner can take, and maybe the partner has some suggestions that I can take for my role and for that person's role. It's okay. We could take suggestions, just don't take my role. We can grow from one another and learn from one another in our different roles when we come together to communicate about it assertively and effectively. Don't take my role. Help me in my role. That's the key. So those are the 5 reasons that couples clash. Number 1, having a single mindset versus a marital or long-term relationship mindset or relationship mindset. 2, poor communication. 3, unknown triggers because of unresolved issues or trauma history. We also not operating as a team was number 4. And number 5, not understanding our roles in relationships, not understanding each other's role. So those are the 5 reasons that couples clash. Now, are there only 5? No, there's more. But those are the 5 that I decided to talk to you about today. So this is the end of Relationships Week. I hope that you enjoyed the message. I hope that you got a lot from the nuggets that were dropped here this week. I encourage you to listen to these videos more than once and take notes, because it will benefit you in your relationship. And even if you're not in a relationship right now, that is fine. You'll get some nuggets to know what to do when you are in a relationship and how to prepare yourself right now as a single person for that relationship that you desire. So now you know what red flags to look for. Now you know how to improve yourself, because the same red flag you're looking for in someone else, do you have those flags? Because they're looking for them in you as well. So we learn how to be the best. We are learning how to be the best that we can be while we're in a relationship and when we get into a relationship. This information is always relevant. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It never changes, because we as people, we have we come to the table with the same things yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So this information is always relevant. We're the same human beings with the same issues, and so the same flaws and the same ways to help. Yes, and more innovative things happen all the time. So take some notes, work on yourself, do some assessing and reassessing continually. Put some work into yourself, because you know what? You want that mate that you have, or the mate that you want, to put work into him or herself. But don't look for someone to do what you're not doing yourself. It starts with you as the individual. Like Michael Jackson's song said, man in the mirror or woman in the mirror, look at yourself first. Do what you want in your mate. So when you come to the table, yes, this is what I'm looking for. And you know what? I have that same thing. I'm bringing to the table the same things I'm looking for in my mate. And when we can do that, can you imagine we're talking about a real power couple, right? When we come to the table as whole as we can be, that's power. That's true power in a relationship. So thank you so much for joining me for Relationships Week this week on Life with Sharon, Midday Motivation. Next week, join me for Entrepreneurs Week. Every day, a different entrepreneur on, and we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what they've learned along the way, some of the pitfalls, some of the highlights, the lowlights, and some tips and strategies for the different fields that they're in. For those of you who may be starting out or wanting to be an entrepreneur and want some tips from those people who are already doing it. Remember, like minds. So I'm bringing some people on with like minds who are driven to succeed in their particular industry, and they're going to help you along the way with some tips and some strategies and some things to try to avoid, if you can, just from their experience. So that's what we're going to do next week on Entrepreneurs Week here on Life with Sharon, Midday Motivation. If anyone is looking for a relationship coach, entrepreneur coach, personality coach, you can click the link in the description and send me an email at fulllifecommunications@gmail.com. So the email is in the description. So thank you so much for joining me today. Again, like the page, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and we will see you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Make it a productive weekend. Make it a self-care weekend. Enjoy family and friends and be safe. Have a great day. I love you. God loves you. Shalom.